Hey guys, so I wanted to do this, not that long ago. Unfortunately, had a lot of stuff going on this weekend and all that. And of course, this weekend being Easter weekend, you have to, focus on that and everything. But I wanted to come out here and talk about the fact that also this past weekend, it wasn't just WrestleMania weekend on Easter weekend, it was also BABSCon weekend as well. Excuse me. Yeah, it was BABSCon weekend from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. And talk about, a choice in dates and everything, but, then again, you probably don't have any other choice but to book around that time frame because you don't have any other options. But yeah, unfortunately, on Easter weekend, or this past Easter weekend, BABSCon came to an end. BABSCon, BABSCON, came to an end in Burlingame after running since about 2014. And it was the largest or second largest MLP Brony Pegasus convention, alongside BronyCon, and BronyCon ended about 6 years prior. But why did it come to an end? Well, seemingly the same reasons I think BronyCon came to an end that I've looked up, and that is the fact of financial cost and everything. To rent out certain sections of the hotel, the convention center, if you will, to have the convention take place in, as well as it costs the expenses to fly out certain guests and everything to take part in panels and everything. So it was a lot of, I think, financial stuff going on that led to them deciding to bring it to an end when they did. Of course, there was also some controversial stuff going on, like the firing of the musician Peekaboo, which led to a lot of other musical acts withdrawing as well in solidarity. And then, of course, there's a lot of reports of disorganization going on behind the scenes and such. So, you can't really blame BABSCon for being like, the people in charge of BABSCon being like, look, we're not going to deal with this anymore. Let's just end this on a high note as best we can and see what the future holds down the line. And the same thing with BronyCon. BronyCon was mostly the fact that, it was financial, of course. There was a decrease, a waning decrease in the fandom, just like, which is also, like I said, one of the reasons BABSCon, shut down this year as well. But it was a decrease, waning in the fandom, and also they didn't want to, they didn't want to, I guess you could say, milk out the cash cow that was BronyCon, the success that was BronyCon, too much. They didn't want to oversaturate it too much, if you will, especially with the fact that, the year they closed down was the year that the G4 Friendship is Magic came to an end. Now, could BronyCon still gone on even afterwards? Absolutely. Absolutely could have continued on. In fact, I believe, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels this way, but I believe they could have kept going on, and them keeping, in existence would have helped maybe, get people behind, get fans behind, G5, new generation, make your mark, tell your tale. But that didn't happen. They just decided, look, the original show that we based this convention on since 2010, it's ending. Let's just end this all on a high note and see what happens. And that's what they did. And the same can be said with BABSCon. But BABSCon kept going. BABSCon basically came into existence around 2013. They were founded in 2013 and came into existence around the third and fourth season of the show. And they kept going and going up until this time, which has been about 11 years. 12 years since it was founded, 11 years since it started. So over a decade, which isn't bad. It's not bad at all. But again, a lot of things just negatively contributed to the end of the convention. Again, things happening disorganizedly behind the scenes, firing of talent, certain musical talent that caused other musical talent to withdraw in solidarity. And then, of course, the declining, the waning of the interest in the fandom and all that, which, again, is not entirely true because, you could still watch My Little Pony Friendship is Magic and My Little Pony G5 on the respective outlets, I should say, that they're on. Tubin has the show on there, all the seasons. Kid Doodle has it. Netflix has all of G5. So and YouTube, of course, has a lot of MLP G4. So you have a lot of outlets that you could watch the show, both shows on, to kind of, catch up to what you missed, see what all the fuss and everything was if you're new to the fandom, and you'll just go from there. And of course, you have Everfree Northwest happening in August of this year, August 22nd to 25th. So you still have a lot of outlets for for the for the fandom to really endorse absorb itself into, I should say, absorb itself into, more so than just BABSCon and BronyCon. But basically it's just unfortunate that two of the biggest MLP conventions, not just in the world but in the United States and North America, have come to an end in the past 6 years. It's just unfortunate that it's happened. But again, it's the expenses. And you look at BronyCon, the fact that they would rent out, like I said, the Baltimore Convention Center to hold the event, and it would cost them a lot of money, not just for that, but to rent out hotels for the guests and all this kind of stuff. And then of course you have the San Francisco Bay Area where Burlingame's at, where BABSCon was, and that again, same thing. And then all the other stuff that I mentioned just really doesn't, I guess you could say, it just really doesn't stay status. It doesn't really stay stature for as long as you would like it to. And in the end, it just ends up piling up, and you're realizing, financially that you can't do it anymore, and you don't want to keep milking it until it's dry. You want to end it, on a decent note or on a high note. And that's what BronyCon did in 2019. Again, they could have stayed around to keep eyes on, or to get eyes on G5, but the main reasoning for existing since 2010 was G4. So for them to close out around the same time that G4 did, they're like, look, we don't want to milk it till it's dry and it's not good anymore. Let's just end it on a high note, along with the ending of of the series. And BABSCon, they stepped in and they said, hey, we'll continue on. We'll even try to get people's eyes on G5. But again, a lot of stuff just came into play that just really hindered them in the end. It just hindered them financially, controversially behind the scenes with disorganization, firings and stuff like that. And they're just like, look, we can't do it anymore. Let's just end this on a decent note. And maybe they might come up, maybe they're thinking, hey, maybe we can try to revive this, down the line. Because again, there are murmurs and rumors and discussions of what G6 is going to be like. And if G6 is anything as to what's being talked about, leaked, potentially, quote unquote, leaked and all that, then maybe we might see a return of BABSCon and maybe BronyCon down the line. But for right now, it's like, let's just take a break, see what the future holds. Now, again, you have Everfree Northwest. They have not said anything about the future of their convention or anything. I think they're going to continue to try to keep going strong, because their convention takes place in one of the more convention-friendly areas or regions of the country, or the United States, and that's Seattle, Washington. So hopefully they'll be okay going forward. But if they make any announcement in August, I'm not going to be surprised, nor with anybody else. But I think they should be okay for the time being. Now, for me, unfortunately, I never got to go to a BABSCon. In fact, I was trying to plan to go this year financially, but ironically saying that back to back, it didn't meet my needs. It didn't meet up to my expectations. I couldn't save up what I wanted to and all that to try to go. Now, you might look at what I'm wearing and say, well, how do you say you didn't go if you're wearing that? Well, I got this t-shirt, and I got the Babs Lab 2020, the Babs Lab Season 2 2021 t-shirt on Etsy, on the BABSCon Etsy store, I should say, about a couple years ago. So I have those as souvenirs to basically, acknowledge what was basically taking place in my backyard, even though 75 plus miles away in my backyard, known as the Central Valley Bay Area. So I wanted something to at least acknowledge that, hey, I could have been there, but at least I have something from that event. So, that's why I'm wearing this. That's why I wore that yesterday and everything, so that way I could, basically acknowledge that I want to be part of it. I want to, I wanted to be part of it and everything. And that maybe if financially things would have worked out, I could have done that. But unfortunately, nothing did. Now, with that said, do I think, we could see a revival of BABSCon and BronyCon in the future? Again, it all depends on what Gen 6 is going to look like. If it's going to be what has been leaked about, talked about, and everything, then yeah, there's a good chance we could see him come back. But if not, there's an old saying of "Don't be sad it's gone, be happy that it was here." And even though I never got to go, watching certain vlogs and everything by those like Lightning Bliss and Josh Scorcher, aka Firebrand, and Silver Quill, I'm just glad that it was, in existence and all that. And I'm just glad that, people got a chance to be part of it and acknowledge the fandom and celebrate the fandom and all that. And even create projects out of the fandom. Like you have TF Analysis, if you will, that's on the Dr. Wolf channel. So that's kind of cool. To see, to see the animation improve from that throughout the years, along with what you see with Lightning. Sorry about that, the battery died on me. But like I said, there's an old saying of "Don't be sad it's gone, be happy that it existed," and basically, with, and basically, you can look at the fact that it helped facilitate and help get people like Lightning Bliss, Dr. Wolf, Silver Quill. It helped them to get noticed, helped them to introduce projects they were working on, Keyframe as well, like TF Analysis, and you got and through things like TF Analysis and all that, people that would go to the conventions would see over time how the animation improved for that series, which is on the Dr. Wolf 001 channel, as well as, you saw the animations improve for Lightning Bliss and Silver Quill and Keyframe and all that, with their reviews and their little series and all that as well. But anyway, though, in closing, I was glad it existed. I wish I could have been part of it, but, there's always next time, and who knows? If it does come back, depending on what G6 is going to be like, then, hey, more power to them. But yeah, unfortunately, it's no longer around after this weekend. But I do want to say thank you to those at BABSCon for at least putting something on in the Bay Area, for a lot of people in my region as well as across the country to take part in. But guys, give me your thoughts overall. What are your thoughts on the end of BABSCon along with BronyCon 6 years prior? Do you think we might see a return of them depending on what G6 will be? Let me know. And until then, I am out.